I'm bad at video games. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is one of the most talked about games of 2025. It's been jokingly referred to as a French JRPG, as it has combat that feels like something out of a Final Fantasy game with a distinctly French story and setting. It also has a unique parrying mechanic that adds a real-time element to the otherwise turn-based combat. Before we go any further, I will say that it is very difficult to talk about this game without spoiling at least a few plot points. The story is full of mystery with a plot that contains a number of twists and turns. I'm not going to go into detail on late game plot elements, but if you are someone who likes to avoid all spoilers and are thinking about playing this game, it's definitely a recommend. The story is up there with The Last of Us as one of the most engaging stories in any game I've ever played. It is probably the only game I've ever played, other than a fully narrative experience like Gone Home, where I was actually hooked by the story before the mechanics. And for the most part, the gameplay mechanics work pretty well too. Now that we got that out of the way, I can talk a little bit more about the story. You play as a team of expeditioners from Lumiere, a city on an island where for the last 67 years, a monolith guarded by a mysterious figure called the Paintress has counted down from 100. Every year as the number goes down, anyone who is that many years old dies by fading away into flower petals in what they call the gommage. Also, every year, a group of people in their final year travel to the monolith to try and defeat the Paintress before their gommage. The expositions are named for the number on the monolith when they travel, and you play as Expedition 33. What I've just summarized covers about 2 hours worth of cutscenes and other bits with limited interactivity at the beginning of the game. The writing and character work is good enough to justify the time spent, but it's still pushing it. Just make sure you're in the right headspace on your first play session so you can get that bit out of the way and don't bounce off halfway through. As often happens in these stories, upon reaching what they call the continent, where the monolith and the Paintress loom ominously, things immediately go sideways. A man in late middle age, maybe 50 or 60, appears and murders the majority of the exposition. You spend the next few hours putting together a team of survivors, working with whimsical beings called gestrels, and occasionally finding breadcrumbs that hint at some connection the character Mile has with the old man and some other characters that randomly show up in black and white. Exactly 33% of the way through the game, a major thing happens that leads to meeting a character named Verso, who sort of shifts to becoming the point of view character. Usually I hate when the protagonist shifts in games, but this time it sort of worked for me. I found the early game point of view character Gustavo a little bit unlikable, and Verso's mysterious checkered past was endearing, at least at first. I really like the combat in this game. I'm not generally a fan of turn-based games because they either have a system that's too simple and gets repetitive or boring. Classic RPGs like Earthbound and some of the older Final Fantasy games fall into this category. Don't at me. Or they have impenetrable and or overly complicated combat systems that cause my eyes to glaze over. The second Octopath Traveler game falls into this category for me. This game threads that needle almost perfectly by implementing a few unique elements. First, each character plays differently, not just in the sense of one being a mage and another being a fighter, but they have their own completely unique mechanics. Mael gets bonuses based on her stances. Verso has a perfection meter where he gets stronger based on how many hits he gets in versus how many he takes. And Monoko gets a new skill for every unique enemy he defeats. This keeps the combat from being repetitive, but in other games like the aforementioned Octopath Traveler 2, piling on the mechanics can become overwhelming. Expedition 33 does a great job of rolling the mechanics out slowly and organically over a number of hours. Most importantly, you actually use all the characters you're introduced to. At any given time, there are 5 characters available to you, and you use 3 of them in your primary party. When that party is defeated, you send in the last 2. Maybe it's because I'm bad at video games, but I found myself sending in the reserve team a lot. The other thing that sets this game apart from other turn-based games is the parry system. 2025 has been the year of the parry for me. Early in the year, I played 2023's Jedi Survivor, where the lightsaber parry system made me really feel like I was in a series of fencing duels with dark-side Force users. Then I played Doom: The Dark Ages, where the color-based shield parry system led to a euphoric sensory overload. And now with Expedition 33, we have turn-based combat that requires Dark Souls-style pattern recognition and leads to Dark Souls-style satisfaction when things go well. When an opponent attacks, you get a split second to read the description of the attack and recognize the animation before you must respond with either a parry, a jump, a dodge, or a gradient parry. Generally speaking, the dodge window is wider than the parry window, but the parry window allows for a counterattack and gives you AP, which you can use for special attacks. Attacks that require jumps are indicated by an icon, and gradient attacks are indicated by the screen turning black and white, usually allowing for big damage on counterattacks. This added dimension of combat makes encounters much more dynamic than a typical turn-based game. It allows for comebacks if you successfully dodge or parry all of an enemy's attacks, and prevents you from becoming complacent, as even random enemies can pretty much wipe you out in a turn or two if you don't engage with the systems. It also adds a strategic element. Certain attacks are easier to parry than others. Since you have to parry all of the hits on an attack to pull off a counterattack, sometimes it makes sense to just dodge if you've already missed a parry or if you know you won't get the timing right. Late in combat, you might feel that you just need to survive one more turn, so you can dodge an attack that you might otherwise try to parry. It's all super interesting and engaging. Clearly, Expedition 33 is a great game for all the things that I've mentioned. However, I do want to warn you that I found the final act a little disappointing. There are breadcrumbs left throughout the game, and maybe I missed some of them, but 90% of the answers to questions involving Renoir, Verso, Mael, the Paintress, and the Curator are answered in a 30-minute series of cutscenes at the end of Act 2, with Act 3 being basically one final level. The very ending of the game is satisfying, but there are so many long cutscenes, each one seeming like it's going to be the end of the game, only for there to be another one afterward. It sort of overstays its welcome. Also, most of the side content is a miss for me. Optional bosses are way too difficult if you just stumble upon them, and the options for returning to them involve a clunky fast travel system and slow backtracking through the overworld. And then there are what they call parkour challenges, which involve awkward platforming sequences that really feel like an afterthought. Luckily, this stuff is completely optional. So those are my thoughts. If not for some of the late game weaknesses, this would be a shoo-in for Game of the Year. Though admittedly, the only games I've played that released this year so far are Mario Kart World and Doom: The Dark Ages. If you played Expedition 33, what are your thoughts? If you didn't, are you planning on getting to it sometime once you play the other 37 games in your backlog? Thanks for watching.